Now, in phase 2 as well, kauchaomai, kauchema, and kauchesis is used in phase 2, the post-salvation spiritual life, both in the positive sense, meaning not the sinful way, boasting in the correct way, and in the negative sense, the sinful way, the arrogant way. Let's go over the positive sense first. Boasting and execution and function of the spiritual life, Galatians 6:4, verse 14. 1 Corinthians 1:31, we went over that yesterday. And 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 17, our passage, Philippians 1:26, 3:3, Hebrews chapter 3, verse 6. Boasting and execution and function in the spiritual life in front of men. So you can feel confident and relaxed and happy about who you are in the spiritual life and what you've obtained in the spiritual life by grace, obviously, in front of men. This is part of happiness and confidence in front of people and having courage towards people. See, boasting also implies courage. This is found in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 12, 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 10, and perhaps from what I might study, many more of these passages also can be put in here, but I put them somewhere else. Up ahead. Also boasting in service to God as divine good. Romans chapter 5, verse 17. 1 Corinthians 1:12. 2 Corinthians 11:10. So how can you boast in your divine good towards God? In the fact that you are producing something that's acceptable by God on the basis of grace, and it is not on the basis of arrogance. Within the sphere of humility, you feel you are content at the fact that this is divine good and it's acceptable to God. To know that you're in the right place and you have the right mental attitude, yes, that contentment, that happiness, that satisfaction is boasting. See, boasting is very technical. Boasting in one's condition, in James chapter 1, verse 9, is talking to Christians who are not rich, they're poor, and it's saying those who have a low position, well, you should boast in your high position in Christ. Even though you're poor, you know that you have a high position because you're a royal family of God because of your union with Christ. And that's found in James chapter 1, verse 9. Boasting also in the sufferings of the spiritual life, and this is a very important one for me also. This is found in Romans chapter 5, verse 3, 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9. And so what does it mean by boasting in your sufferings? What? Embracing your suffering. Don't react. Don't use your human solutions. Don't whine to God. I mean, you could probably whine here and there, but eventually He's going to put you in your place, and rightly so. But it means you embrace the suffering, knowing that this is going to produce more spiritual growth and as a result, more blessing. The attitude to have that falls into boasting in the midst of suffering is to focus on the solution. Don't focus on the problem. And so this is also part of boasting. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9, Paul says he boasts in his weakness so that omnipotence can function. So as you advance in the spiritual life, you're going to know that you're going to feel weak. You're going to receive extreme pressure, things that hurt, things that you cannot do anything about, that you wish you could change. And this is all weakness. So what is boasting in weakness here? You embrace it, understanding that omnipotence, that the divine solution is going to function, and it has something better for you than what you have for yourself. And that's boasting. A minister's boasting about positive believers under his teaching is found in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 31, 2 Corinthians 7:4, verse 14, 8:24, chapter 9, verses 2 and 3. And we saw this in the previous chapters, how Paul boasts to other people about the Corinthians' advance in the plan of God. This is contentment, happiness, knowing that his teaching, the pastor's teaching of the Word of God, is not in vain. It is producing something in his flock, spiritual growth. The negative sense, the sinful boasting in the post-salvation spiritual life, that is for those negative believers. So there's boasting in resonance and function in cosmic one. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 6 mentions many sins in cosmic one, and how the Corinthians boasted about these things, certain things. By the way, all these next verses have to do with Cosmic 1 and Cosmic 2, but I'm just going to go over the specifics. Boasting and residence and function in the residence and function in Cosmic 2 is found in James chapter 4 verse 16. Also, Jewish boasting in the law, Romans chapter 5 verse 2. Why did I put this one when it also applies to unbeliever Jews? Because a lot of Jewish believers struggle with this. Being Christians already, members of the royal family of God, there's always that temptation of going back to the law. That's found in Romans chapter 5 verse 2, Galatians 6:14. Boasting in one's own production, human good. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 verse 3. Boasting in appearance. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 12. I'm pretty sure I don't have to go over what boasting means here. Boasting in humans and human leaders. 1 Corinthians chapter 3 verse 21. A lot of these verses have to do with, are directed to the Corinthians. Boasting also in things that do not belong to you, nor given to you by God. The things beyond measure. 2 Corinthians chapter 10 verses 13 to 16. I use this here in the personal meaning, the individual meaning. There's also the ministerial meaning, where ministers encroach upon others, pastors going and boasting in the things in the regions beyond measure. The minister cannot boast in divine good production. The minister cannot boast in divine good production. Okay, yes. 1 Corinthians 9 verse 16. Now this boasting here is technical, because you can boast in divine good production, as we just mentioned up above. But you cannot boast in terms of arrogance. And that's found in 1 Corinthians chapter 9 verse 16, where Paul says, I'm preaching the gospel, but it is my job. So at the end of the day, you cannot become arrogant about it. Paul boasts like a fool in the cosmic system. And we're going to see this in the next chapter, 2 Corinthians 11 verses 16 to 18. The boasting of the false teacher in the cosmic system is found in 2 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 12. And yesterday I put a note bene, note well, focus. Boasting in anything that one has as a believer, and boasting about it as if you obtained it yourself. This is becoming arrogant about something legitimate, something in the plan of God. And that's found in 1 Corinthians chapter 4 verse verse 7, where the Corinthians were becoming arrogant about the things that they've received from God. He says, you cannot become arrogant as if you did not receive them. You did not obtain them yourself. God gave them to you. So one can have a wrong attitude about something legitimate. Mental attitude is everything, and this is something that you're going to encounter. We all encounter, is that you can become arrogant about something right that you've done. Your advancement in the plan of God, your learning of Bible doctrine. You become so inflexible towards other people, very self-sufficient in the arrogant sense about yourself, and therefore we need God's correcting, his punishment constantly. 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 7 talks about the danger of becoming arrogant about revelation, and we're going to see this 2 chapters ahead. And then we also have kauchesis, and phase 3, boasting in phase 3. We only have it in the positive sense. The minister's boasting in his flock at the rapture, or the judgment seat of Christ, is found in 1 Thessalonians 2:19, Philippians 2:16, 2 Corinthians 1:14. Also, the believer's boasting in his pastor at the judgment seat of Christ in 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 12. So you feel content, you feel happy, you know the fact, that satisfaction that you execute the spiritual life under your pastor's teaching. There's no need to feel ashamed of your pastor, no need to feel ashamed of me, even though I can act like an ass sometimes. So this is the doctrine of boasting. It's technical. I tried to put in all the meanings, so it's a work in progress, and because we're going to find this word everywhere in the Pauline epistles, And if you study Paul, you better get to the point of understanding his use of kachaomai. Put all these meanings together, all these verses, and you come up with what I attempted to define. Boasting in the plan of God is, first of all, learning, understanding the things God has given you, increasing them, obtaining your motivation, your enthusiasm, your contentment, your satisfaction, your happiness, your confidence, your identity, your sense of belonging, your sense of destiny, your prize, even looking forward to your prize. Everything that makes the believer be and know that he is self-sufficient in the spiritual life. That's how I got this long definition. Okay. Now we can move on to our last verse. In verse 18, the NIV says, "For it is not the one who commends himself who is approved, but the one whom the Lord commends." This is a pretty good translation, but let's analyze the verse really quick. And so we have an explanatory here. Gar, they say it's causal here. Let's go for now. He explains something. Why he who wants to boast, the one who boasts, let him boast in the Lord. Boast in the plan of God. Why must he do that? Because here he explains. Because if you boast in terms of commending yourself, and that's your boasting, it does not mean you are commended. It doesn't mean you are established as right with God. Or it does not mean that you're established as a legitimate minister, as these Judaizers have done. So Paul explains here with the for, and then you look for the nominative. Look for the nominative. You want to look for the nominative? Well, you can find an article in the nominative. Ho. This is a negative here in the emphatic position. Ho. Heauton is not a nominative. It's an accusative. Look at this. On. But you see the participle, and this is why you kind of have to know, or not kind of, but you do have to know your case endings in the participles. The participle does have a different ending. This on here looks like a genitive if it were a noun, but it's a participle. This is the present active participle of sunistemi. Sunistanon. It means commend. It's a compound word. We have not gone over the etymology of this word, but it's sun, which means with, plus histemi, which means to stand. And so literally means stand with. Also in the group, it means to bring together, to stand together by gathering or collecting. It also means to bring together among people, recommending a person to each other. Well, recommending one, it's as in introducing a person to them, or commending each other in a group, standing together. It also means to provide evidence of a personal characteristic through action, therefore to demonstrate as right or wrong. Here we're going to translate it as we have over here, those who commend themselves in a subjective way, the Mutual Admiration Society. What does verse 12 say? For as you see, we do not have the audacity to judge ourselves worthy, or to compare ourselves with, or to judge ourselves worthy with, or compare ourselves to certain ones who constantly commend themselves. And how do they commend themselves? Here he explains. In fact, they themselves measure themselves by means of themselves and compare themselves to themselves. Comparing themselves to themselves, they do not understand. It's subjective arrogance here, emphasis on people. And so he goes back and talks about these Judaizers, those negative Corinthians that have followed them. He's talking to you and to me. We can also get into this subjective thinking of commending yourselves just because we had a little success here and there, because you obtained a little bit of attention, because everyone's looking at you and brown-nosing you. You are not commended by people. You are not commended by yourself. You are commended by the Lord when you execute the spiritual life.